Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. There was a boy named Alex who had a secret. It wasn't the kind of secret where you find a hidden treasure map in the attic. It was different. Every day, he would see the girls in his class with their colorful clothes, and something inside him wanted to try those clothes too. But Alex kept this wish locked away in his heart because he was afraid of what others might say. Alex's room was filled with posters of rockets and dinosaurs, but in his closet, behind his soccer shoes and school books, he hid a small, shiny piece of fabric. It was a bright purple scarf he had found on the playground. Whenever he was alone, he would wrap it around his shoulders and look in the mirror. The scarf made him feel like a different person, like he could be anyone he wanted to be. School days were the same routine for Alex. He'd wear his usual jeans and t-shirts, but his eyes would always wander to the clothes the girls wore. Sparkly bracelets, soft sweaters, and skirts that twirled with them as they spun around. He loved the sounds the fabrics made, the shh of nylon when they moved. One afternoon during a math test, Alex couldn't focus. He kept thinking about a dress he had seen in a store window on his way to school. It was pink with flowers on it and looked as light as a feather. He imagined what it would feel like to wear it, how the skirt would swish around his legs, and for a moment, he smiled. But the smile quickly faded when he remembered he was in class, and that dress wasn't meant for him. "Alex, is everything okay?" Mrs. Thompson, his teacher, asked after the test. She was someone who seemed tough on the outside. Her voice was always firm, and she hardly ever smiled, but her eyes were kind. She could tell when a student was upset, and she always wanted to help. "Yeah, I'm fine," Alex lied, looking down at his shoes. Mrs. Thompson didn't believe him. "You can talk to me," she said gently. "If there's anything wrong, I'm here to listen." Alex nodded, but he didn't say anything more. He grabbed his backpack and headed home, feeling the weight of the secret heavier than ever. That night, as Alex lay in bed, he thought about Mrs. Thompson's offer to help. She had a way of making problems seem smaller, easier to handle. Maybe, just maybe, he could tell her about the scarf, about the dresses, and about his wish to try them on. He fell asleep with those thoughts swirling in his mind, not sure what tomorrow would bring. The next day at school, Alex felt his stomach twist into knots. He had made up his mind. Today would be the day he would talk to Mrs. Thompson. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Alex took a deep breath and walked to her classroom instead of heading straight home. Mrs. Thompson was sitting at her desk, sorting through papers. She looked up and gave him a small smile. "Alex, what brings you here after school?" Alex's hands were sweaty, and his heart was racing. "Can we talk?" he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Mrs. Thompson said, and she motioned for him to take a seat. "What's on your mind?" The words tumbled out slowly at first as Alex explained his love for the colors, the textures, and the shapes of girls' clothes. He told her about the purple scarf, the pink dress with flowers, and how he felt when he thought about wearing them. Mrs. Thompson listened, her face showing no sign of surprise, only warmth and understanding. When Alex finished, there was a long silence. He was afraid to look up, afraid to see disappointment or anger in his teacher's face. But when he finally did, he saw something he didn't expect. Mrs. Thompson was smiling at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Alex, thank you for trusting me with your secret," she said. "I can see this means a lot to you, and I want to help." Alex blinked in surprise. "You do?" "Yes," she replied. "I have an idea. How about you come over to my house after school tomorrow? I have a lot of clothes that I think you might like to try on." Alex felt a rush of excitement and fear. "Really? But what if someone sees me?" "We'll be careful," Mrs. Thompson assured him. "You can come over when everyone else has left. It will be our little after-school project." They spent the next few minutes talking about the plan. Mrs. Thompson would wait for Alex after school the next day, and they would walk to her house together. She explained that she enjoyed fashion and had many clothes that she used to wear for fun events and parties. Alex listened, his heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. As he walked home, Alex felt like he was in a dream. He was going to try on all the beautiful clothes he had only ever imagined wearing. He thought about what it would be like to see himself in a mirror, dressed in a way that matched how he felt on the inside. He spent the rest of the evening in a daze, barely touching his dinner, his thoughts on skirts that twirled and fabrics that felt soft against the skin. Before he went to bed, he looked at the purple scarf again, feeling a sense of hope. Tomorrow, he would get to see what it was like to not just dream about the clothes, but to actually wear them. That night, Alex had dreams filled with colors and laughter, a preview of what was to come. In his dream, he was spinning in a room full of dresses, each one more beautiful than the last, and for the first time in a long while, he felt completely happy. When the morning sun crept through his window, Alex woke up feeling different. He was nervous, but there was also an excitement buzzing through his veins. He got ready for school, the secret plan with Mrs. Thompson shining in his mind like a promise. The day went by in a blur. Alex couldn't focus on the lessons. He was too busy imagining the afternoon. When the final bell rang, his heart started to beat faster. He waited until the hallways were empty, and then he went to Mrs. Thompson's classroom. She was there, ready and waiting. "Shall we go?" she asked, and Alex nodded. Together, they left the school and walked towards a new experience, one that would change Alex in ways he never imagined. Alex followed Mrs. Thompson down the quiet streets. The walk felt longer than it was, each step heavy with anticipation. When they reached her house, it was a cozy little place with a bright red door and a small garden out front. Mrs. Thompson led Alex inside, and that's when he saw it. The wardrobe. It was big and white, with doors that swung open to reveal rows and rows of clothes. "Welcome to my collection," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with excitement. She guided Alex to the wardrobe, and they started looking through the clothes. There were dresses of all kinds. Long, flowing gowns with delicate lace, short, sparkly dresses that shimmered in the light, and everything in between. Alex's eyes were wide as he touched the fabrics, each one telling a story of its own. There were skirts, too, some with ruffles, others with pleats, and all in colors that made the room look like a rainbow. "What do you think?" Mrs. Thompson asked. "Anything you'd like to try?" Alex pointed to a dress. It was soft pink, with a skirt that looked like it would bounce with each step. Mrs. Thompson smiled and took it off the hanger. "Great choice. Let's find you some undergarments and a wig to complete the look." They picked out a pair of white nylon undergarments that felt soft to the touch. Alex held them, his hands trembling slightly. It was all so new, so exciting. Then Mrs. Thompson opened another box, and inside was a wig. It was blonde and long, and when Mrs. Thompson placed it gently on Alex's head, he almost didn't recognize the person staring back at him in the mirror. For the next few hours, they tried different outfits. Alex twirled in a blue dress with white polka dots, laughed in a green dress with tiny bows, and even posed in a fancy black dress that made him feel like he was going to a grand ball. Mrs. Thompson was there every step of the way, helping him with zippers and offering advice on which shoes went with which dress. After the dresses, Mrs. Thompson showed Alex how to do makeup. She started with foundation, explaining how to apply it evenly. Then came the blush, a touch of pink on the cheeks. Eyeshadow was next, and Alex chose a subtle blue that made his eyes pop. Mrs. Thompson applied mascara with a steady hand and finally lipstick. Alex picked a gentle rose color, and when he pressed his lips together, he felt a thrill run through him. They had almost forgotten about the time when Mrs. Thompson glanced at the clock. "Oh, it's getting late. Your mother will be wondering where you are." A wave of panic hit Alex. He had been so caught up in the joy of the day that he hadn't thought about going back to his regular clothes, to his regular life. "I should change," he said quickly, looking down at the dress he was wearing. But Mrs. Thompson shook her head. "Actually, I have something to tell you. Your mother already knows." Alex froze. "She knows?" "Yes," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice gentle. "I called her. I thought she should know about this, about how you feel, and she was very understanding. She told me to tell you that she loves you and that you should come home just as you are." Alex's heart felt like it was going to burst. His mother knew his secret, and she wasn't angry or upset. She was okay with it. He felt tears well up in his eyes, not from sadness, but from a feeling of being loved and accepted. "Are you sure?" he asked, still in disbelief. Mrs. Thompson nodded. "Very sure. So what do you say? Shall we go?" Alex looked at his reflection in the mirror. He saw himself, but also someone new, someone brave and bright. "Let's go," he said, a smile spreading across his face. Together they stepped out of the house and into the evening light. Alex walked beside Mrs. Thompson, the hem of his dress swishing softly, the wig's blonde curls bouncing with each step. He was nervous about what his mom would say, but there was also a sense of freedom that made him walk a little taller. Alex's shoes clicked on the sidewalk as he walked beside Mrs. Thompson. His heart was doing somersaults, but every step he took in the pink dress and blonde wig made him feel a little braver. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks that matched the feeling in Alex's chest. As they turned onto his street, Alex saw his house. It looked the same as always, but to him it was as if he was seeing it for the first time again. His stomach was filled with butterflies, and his hands felt clammy. Mrs. Thompson gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You're doing great," she said softly. Alex nodded, trying to believe her words. As they reached the front door, he paused, taking a deep breath. Mrs. Thompson rang the doorbell and stepped back, giving Alex a nod that said, "This is your moment." The door opened, and there stood Alex's mom. Her eyes went from Mrs. Thompson to Alex, and for a second, nobody spoke. Then, his mom's face broke into a smile, and she stepped forward. "Oh, Alex, look at you." Alex braced himself, ready for many questions, maybe even some worry, but all his mom did was open her arms. He stepped into her embrace, feeling her arms wrap around him. It wasn't a wordy moment. It was a quiet one, filled with understanding. "You're home now," his mom said, her voice soft. "And you look beautiful." They stepped inside, and Alex looked around the living room. It was filled with all the familiar things he knew, but he stood there in a dress and makeup, feeling like a part of him that had been hidden was now out in the open. His mom turned to Mrs. Thompson. "Thank you for bringing him home. I don't know how to thank you enough." Mrs. Thompson smiled. "Just seeing Alex happy is thanks enough for me." As Mrs. Thompson left, Alex's mom turned to him. "Let's sit down. We have a lot to talk about, don't we?" They sat on the couch, and Alex waited for his mom to start asking him why he wanted to wear dresses and makeup. But she just took his hand and said, "You know, your happiness is the most important thing to me. If wearing dresses and makeup makes you happy, then that's what you should do." Alex's eyes were wet with tears again, but they were happy ones. "But what about school? What about what other people will think?" His mom squeezed his hand. "Let's not worry about other people right now. You're my son, and I love you, no matter what you wear. We'll figure out school together." They talked until the stars came out. Alex's mom listened to everything he had to say about the scarf, the dresses, and how he felt. She didn't have all the answers, but she promised they would find them together. That night, Alex went to bed in his own room, surrounded by his things, but he felt different. He had taken off the dress and wig, but the feeling they gave him stayed. He fell asleep with a smile, knowing he was loved for who he was. The morning light crept into Alex's room, warming his face and pulling him from his dreams. He opened his eyes to a room that seemed the same as always, but felt entirely different. Today wasn't just another day. It was the first day of a new chapter in his life. He got out of bed and walked to his closet, passing by the mirror. For a moment, he saw the reflection of the boy from yesterday, the one who had found a piece of himself he'd been too scared to show. But today, he felt stronger. Downstairs, the smell of breakfast filled the air. Alex's mom was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. She looked up and smiled at him. "Good morning, sunshine." "Morning, Mom," Alex replied, taking a seat at the table. As they ate, they talked about ordinary things, what to do today, the funny antics of the neighbor's cat. But there was an unspoken understanding between them, a silent promise of support and love. After breakfast, Alex's mom put down her fork and looked at him seriously. "I called the school this morning. I told them about you, about your interest in clothes that are usually for girls. I wanted them to know so they can help make sure you feel safe and happy." Alex felt a surge of worry. What did they say? "They were very kind," his mom said. "They said you can wear whatever you feel comfortable in, and they'll talk to your classmates. Make sure everyone understands that this is about being who you are." The idea of facing his classmates made Alex's stomach twist, but knowing his mom and his school were behind him gave him courage. "So, what do you want to do today?" his mom asked, bringing him back from his thoughts. Alex thought about the dresses and the makeup, about the freedom of being himself. "I think I'd like to wear one of the dresses today, maybe the pink one from yesterday." His mom nodded. "Okay, we can start there, and remember, you don't have to figure everything out at once. We'll take it one step at a time." They cleaned up after breakfast, and then Alex's mom helped him put on the pink dress. It felt even better than yesterday, like it was meant for him. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't just see a boy in a dress. He saw Alex, just Alex. He decided to skip the wig for today. He wanted to blend the parts of him that loved video games and skateboarding with the parts of him that loved dresses and the swish of fabric. They spent the day together, sometimes talking, sometimes just being near each other. His mom taught him more about makeup, and they laughed when the eyeliner went wonky. They took a walk, and some people looked a little longer than usual, but Alex held his head high. His mom's presence was like a shield, telling the world that she was proud of her son. As the day turned to evening, Alex's mom sat down with him. "I want you to know that no matter what you wear, you're my child, and I will always love you. You don't have to be one thing or another, just be you." Alex felt a warmth inside him, a sense of peace. He knew the road ahead might be tricky. There would be people who didn't understand or accept him. But with his mom by his side, he felt like he could face anything. That night, he went to sleep not just with a smile, but with a heart full of hope. He had found himself, and in doing so, had found a deeper love from his mom. And that was the most beautiful feeling of all. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.